Hey guys, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. Today I want to talk about button locks. We're in a bit of a button lock trend right now, and there are some good ones out there. Button locks are nothing new. They've been around for a while, but Civivi had pretty good success with the button lock Elementum. Now, I would argue that part of that is just the Elementum is a nice looking design, and that a number of people were like me and wanted it in a larger size. For me, it's not so much the lock that makes this knife great as it is the size of it, because the original Elementum, despite the fact that I loved the design, was a little too small for me. So this is a size that I really appreciate. Anyway, that's a bit of an aside. The main point is, after the success of the Elementum, the button locks have just gone crazy. I've got the Kaiser Begleiter XL here. This is, of course, the White Mountain Knives exclusive XL Begleiter in button lock. There are a couple of things going on here that I want to point out, because I want to do a little bit of a compare and contrast in terms of what's the best button lock to buy, and why there are a couple of Kaisers that I might look at even over what Civivi is doing. And this would absolutely be one of them, not just because of the size. You guys know I like the larger knives, but there's some other features that this has that are really impressive. So first of all, let's just point out, if you're not familiar with what a button lock is, you'll notice that all of these knives have a little button right here, and as the name implies, that is what locks the knife. So the knife is now closed. I mean, the knife is now locked, and you can see how this sort of barrel comes across and interfaces with the tang of the knife. Now, if I push that down, see how it moves out of the way? That allows the tang of the knife to be free. That's how this button lock works, okay? That's also how the Civivi works. See the same button in there. It's a little tougher to see because of the light, but as I push that little barrel down out of the way, you can see that the knife can then move. Both of these do have something better than some of the previous button locks, which is the locking part of the barrel that comes through the blade. Let's see if I can get that to focus. There we go. It's tapered, which means as this wears, it's going to extend further and maintain the integrity of that lock, which is nice to see. And both of these have that feature, so that's welcome. Now, the Elementum is doing something completely different. The Elementum actually works, well, like a compression lock. So, you on a para where you push the locking leaf over, on a para 2 where you have to push the locking leaf over to get it to release, that's what's happening here. With the button, you're pushing that locking leaf out of the way and allowing the blade to move. All right, so the functionality is different on these. Perhaps I should just quickly show you. Here's my Paramilitary 2. You can see when it locks up, it's because that leaf spring pops over in between this stop pin and the tang of the blade. Okay. And so similar thing is happening on the Elementum, where this leaf spring is pinched between this this stop pin and the tang of the blade. So it's different, but it's a similar kind of mechanical process that's taking place there. All right, so now that we've kind of got a really quick idea of how button locks sort of kind of work, Hogue, I just want to do a quick rundown. There have been some nice ones out there. Brian Ty loves button locks. His customs often have button locks. His collaborations have often had button locks. So there's a bunch of those out there. The mid-tech that he did a few years ago was a button lock, and it was really nicely done. I believe there have been some Microtech button locks. I could be wrong. Oh yeah. Sorry. Famously, the Ferrum Forge Microtech collaboration, the Mordax, I think is the name of it, and then the Malibu were button locks, and they did a slightly different thing with their geometry to get a really nice action, and they did a great job of it. And the other good button lock that always stands out to me is the Hogue X5. It is exceptionally well done, and they have the nice thing about their button lock is they made the detent completely independent of the lock. And again, of all of the knives that I've talked about, in fact, even of these knives here, the very best action I've seen on a button lock knife is still, bar none, the Hogue X5. And I've often thought about just having one in the collection for that reason. I don't have one right now, but you'll have to, you'll just have to take my word for it. But they're a little expensive. These are all pretty budget friendly, and so I feel like these are a couple of knives that might be worth looking at. There's another Kizer as well that's probably worth considering. And yeah, the other Kizer that I'm thinking of it's smaller than the bag letter, but I think it has similar functionality. The Assassin. Sorry, guys, that name just evaded me for a second. Anyway, Kizer Assassin is something you may want to look at if you're interested in some of these, but they don't quite appeal. Now, let me now get into these individual. We've already gone through the functionality of each of these button locks. There are a couple of details, though, that are probably worth touching on. First of all, the blades. So this is Nitro V steel, which is fine. This is 14C28N steel, which is excellent. One of my favorite budget steels. About equal, maybe a teeny bit better, is this 154 CM steel. So these are not that far apart in price. I think these are like $70. This is like 65 and this is like 63. I could be a little off on the pricing there, guys. If you go to White Mountain Knives and buy this you have to, because it's an exclusive. You can use my discount code SharpStuff and save yourself 10%, which would be like $6 or $7 on these knives. Price point is definitely comparable on these. And that does bring up the value equation. There are a couple little things about this. I'm not a huge, like Nitro V steel is fine for a budget knife, but it's not like an amazing steel. Certainly I would much rather have 14C28N or 154CM, both of which I think are fantastic steels. So that's something to consider in terms of which one of these you might buy. The other thing I want to talk about is the action and some of the features within the locking mechanism itself. Okay, so Kizer, by the way, will have, Civivi will have a few button locks that many of my comments could apply to. Okay, so any of their standard button locks, they work quite well. The button can be a little bit tough to access on this one, and the same with the Elementum. But the bearing pivot, the action is nice. There's a lot of good there's a lot of good here. Needless to say, it's a Civivi. The action is very, very enjoyable. Moving over to the Elementum, it's different in that it locks open and closed. So that makes it a little bit of a different thing. And that may be helpful if you're in a jurisdiction where, being able to flick a knife or something like that could be questionable. This knife, you've got to release it before you can open it. And so that may be helpful depending on how certain laws are written or how they're applied. The action is still good. It's on bearings. It can easily be opened with a little bit of assistance, or it can be rolled open or whatever you want to do. Getting over here to the Kizer, though, this does have a feature that's especially good. One, they've done a nice job with the button. It's very accessible. There's no lock stick happening. But bigger than that, this is one of a number of Kizers. I don't know if I'm going to be able to show you. I'm going to say no. But this has dual row ceramic bearings. I'm a huge fan of dual row ceramic bearings. I'd like to see it much more. Really, I'm a fan of anything that takes that bearing interface and spreads those forces out. So there are a number of ways you can do that. You can use dual row. You can use a great big washer the way Chris Reeve Knives does, which again, that's probably my favorite option of all of the options. You can use roller bearings, which again is another favorite option. But anything you can do to spread out those forces is something that's worthwhile and will improve the action on a knife. And you can notice there's just a cleaner feel to this action. It's really, really quite impressive. And there are a number of Kaisers out there right now. A bunch of their new models are doing two things. One is 154 cm steel, which is an excellent steel, and the dual row ceramic bearings, which again is an excellent option, something you normally, outside of real steel, you didn't really see that on a lot of production knives, but it is so nice. I have to say this again. I've said this so many times before, but the if you can get your hands on an older real steel Megalodon, they had roller bearings or needle bearings, which are absolutely phenomenal. Um, and so if you can get your hands on one, that is well worth it. It's probably the best action that you're going to find for that, in the $200 price range. To get better, you've got to go to like a Shiro or something. So, that's my bearing discussion, and just wanted to kind of put that out there. The other thing I've got to say here, in terms of, now this is going to be hard to get. I think Justin sold out right away, and not surprisingly, this is an amazing knife. Definitely deserves to be on. This is already on my knives of the year for 2022 list, and we're still early in 2022. This is a shoe-in. And the value on it is quite good as well. So I could also see this, by the way, working in a smaller size. So let's get back to where we were going with this. I know the Conspirator has been, the big knife. I've had questions about this. I've had people asking me, how is it? I really want to buy one. Do you want to sell yours? All this kind of stuff before I've even really had a chance to get to know it. And I get it. I see why this is popular, and I do like it. But there are some really compelling alternatives out there, especially coming from Kaiser, that I think people ought to be looking at if they're looking at the Conspirator or there's another anyway, someone please put in the comments down below the new Civivi. There's a Civivi that's going to come out like probably either the same day I publish this or within a few days of publishing this video. So someone please drop that in the comments. I just can't remember the name of it. Let's finally finish our discussion with just a general sort of thought process on button locks overall. All right. They're definitely good for fidget factor, right? They're really enjoyable to play with. They deploy quickly, they deploy easily, they're fun. If the button is not well executed, sometimes they're easy. They can be accessed a little too easily. The other thing I've heard people complain about is, what if I'm cutting something and I push the button? Well, number one, if you're cutting and applying force downward and you push the button, nothing happens. It just works like a slip joint. Also, I think that's pretty rare. So that's one of the things you'll sometimes hear about button locks. The other thing is that button locks, especially before, I had some previous button locks from CRKT and a couple of other places. They were really bad to develop blade play. And one of the reasons is, like, this lock has to basically fit perfectly into that little, come on, there you go. See that little opening in the blade? Like, the lock has to interface perfectly with that. And if they don't match up perfectly, you're going to get up and down play. Or you could. Now, what's great is the last few that I've seen, certainly these two that are represented here on the table, and I'm going to assume Civivi is doing this kind of across the board. The button itself is tapered so that as this surface starts to wear, the button can sort of extend further across and continue to keep that lock nice and strong and reliable. The Kaiser here has done the exact same thing. You can see the angle on that cutout, so that this can continue to just wear this way and maintain a nice solid lock. That's very good. Button locks are great for folding knives, but with any folding knife, you've got to remember that it's a folding knife. If you're looking for hard use, tactical, like outdoor survival, bushcraft, whatever, you need a fixed blade. All right. If you are, engaging in normal use for a folding knife, a button lock should be just fine. Is it as strong as a triad lock? No. Is it as strong as an axis lock? Probably not. They are pretty strong, but things can things can go wrong, and I have seen some videos. I actually, it's fun to spend some time watching lock fail videos. Always kind of interesting. But I like button locks about as much as I like any other lock. I can't, I'm not down on them. Other than, as I said, there are some that would develop blade play over time, but most of these seem, these that are represented here have sort of solved that problem. Usually they're easy to deploy. Some can get lock stick. This one, when I first had it, had a little bit of lock stick, but very quickly, within a couple of days, it was gone. This one has a little bit of lock stick, and I'm sure it will, go away. I haven't had this very long, so it's already actually getting a little bit better, but you can hear, maybe you can hear. Hold on. All right, try and listen now. Did you hear that little bit of stick that was in there? So right when you release the lock, there's a little bit of lock stick there. Again, that will go away here shortly. So hopefully this has been a helpful discussion of button locks. It's given you some good examples to consider. And these do feel a little bit different. So not all of these I like as much. In fact, I kind of like this one the least, although I like some other things about it. The design, the feel in hand is very good. So I like some other things about this, but wanted to throw out there that there are some really good options out there right now. Consider, the mechanics of how that button lock works before you pick one. And of course, these are often about fidget factor, and they do have a great fidget factor. Out of all of these, if I was to pick one that I would recommend, I've got to go with the bag letter, guys. I like the 154 cm steel. I like the dual row ceramic bearings, and I personally like the size. Although I know not everyone is as given to larger knives like I am. But if you don't want something this big, the Assassin, I think, has all the same mechanical and material options, but in a smaller size. So there you go, guys. Thanks a lot for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We will talk to you soon.